Alright, so this video is going to be a major catalyst video for three main roads of diverging topics, making this one a really important one to watch. The three roads being One Piece power theories, origin theories, and of course the Sanji video. The topic for this video is observation haki, and the various ways we have seen it and may see it in the future. I think we have seen examples of observation haki in a lot of weird places where we might not have realized it. I ultimately want to connect what we have seen as possible to what might be possible through just pure observation haki powers. If you haven't watched my Haki Devil Fruit theory video yet, I would highly recommend watching my earlier Haki videos to get a base understanding of what I'm talking about in this video, though some of you guys surprised me by understanding instantly what I'm talking about. Anyways, if you're new to my channel, the way I view the world is by making connections. So let me connect you to my vision, the Par vision. So let's start off with what observation haki is. We have seen it plenty of times and have a decent understanding of its foundations. Rayleigh describes it as a power to sense spiritual presence. An example of this was just a few panels before, where Rayleigh was able to sense the number of beasts on Ruskaino without even moving. And then this brings us to another component of observation haki, which is the ability to sense the strength of the spirit. Rayleigh was able to estimate that over 500 of the beasts were stronger than pre-time skip Luffy. This was actually first demonstrated to us by Blackbeard when he vaguely said that when he first met Luffy, it didn't feel like Luffy was worth 30 billion berries, let alone the 100 million he was later given. Then when Blackbeard met Luffy again in Impel Down, he said he could feel that Luffy's haki was stronger than before, which I want to point out that this was before haki was visualized in One Piece, or concretely shown to us as an ability. Luffy's haki was measurable and growing during his time at Impel Down. If you take into account the exposure Luffy had to haki in between Jaya and Impel Down, that makes sense. But also, if you watch my video about haki strengthening, there's several examples of catalysts towards Luffy strengthening his haki naturally during that time. Returning to the main point, observation haki has also been shown to be some sort of empathic ability relating to emotions. Some characters with high tier observation haki has also displayed an ability to understand others' emotional state without even a conversation. Rayleigh noted that Luffy was attuned to the emotions of others, which was an ability within the confines of observation haki. Noting that if this is something within observation haki, there may be other abilities with a similar thematic that is rare but achievable through observation haki. So far at the core of this power is the ability to truly understand other energies. Rayleigh noted that training observation haki against animals was a lot easier because animals aren't typically capable of masking their emotions and intentions, whereas humans are capable of complex emotions and deceitfully masking their emotions and intentions. This deceit is something we touched upon in my Usopp video if you haven't watched that yet, but also Pudding, who becomes more important later on in the video. She was noted to be able to control her emotions so well that she could fool many observation haki users, when the point of observation haki is to see others' true spirit and emotional state. That being said, the other name for observation haki in Skypiea is mantra, which translates to mind rope, and interestingly, the other word that Oda had considered to name it in Skypiea was Tazuna, which translates to reins, control, or hand rope. I really like the inner meaning of mind rope as it gives a really good visualization of how the power might really work. When you think of it like that, and combining the idea of empathy, it's like being able to attach yourself to someone and connect to them on a different level. You'd be able to control the situation so much if you knew their inner spirit like that. But even more so than that, it sounds like two people connecting mind ropes would be a really intimate experience, which we saw an example of, the unexpected bromance between Katakuri and Luffy. They both are high tier observation haki users to the point where their mental connections to each other was so deep they were able to foresee each other's futures. That is an intimate connection, and the relationship became more tangible the longer Katakuri fought Luffy. There was a mutual respect between the two, where eventually Katakuri empathized with Luffy during the fight when Luffy was unfairly paralyzed, and after recognizing that, he even inflicted a wound upon himself and worked with Luffy to ensure a fair fight going forward by meshing their Conqueror's haki. This empathy link was noted in Otahime, when she used her haki to sense the suffering and emotions of that fisherman thief, who was forgiven but also beaten up. She took the time to mentally link to the guy and understand his struggles and put blame on herself while still punishing him. Because it felt like she really cared about him as an individual, he was moved, also indicating that the mind rope is not a one-way street. It was noted that because of her actions through her abilities, she was the embodiment of love, which will be important in a future video, wink wink, talking about the King of Hearts, if you know what I mean. Before I go to the next part about the mind rope being a two-way street, I want to also emphasize the power of the mind rope. It can make people do incredibly irrational things. When Kobe first awakened his observation haki and was able to sense the presence of all the dying and hurt soldiers in pain, because he did not have the control of his mind rope, he unconsciously attached himself to anyone outputting intense emotions, which was primarily all pain and suffering from those dying in the war. This reaction on his mind rope moved him to do probably the most ridiculous action of all of Marineford, which was to confront and challenge arguably the most dangerous man there, Donut Maker. The mental energy of everyone there moved Koby to act on behalf of the energy, an interesting power that might get expanded on later with Usopp and Luffy. But going back to the two-way street of observation Haki, if you watch the Luffy New Power in Wano video, that emphasized an ability that seems to stem off of observation Haki and Voice of All Things, and furthering the idea that both are connected. In that video, you'd see Luffy learned how to control this telepathic ability where not only was he able to communicate to Momonosuke, but also Law's crew. The function, if tied back to observation Haki, would go like this. Luffy would need to sense the entity he would want to connect his mind rope to, which would need calmness, which we already know to be vital for high tier Haki, and probably similar to how Goku uses instant transmission or King Kai's telepathy, sensing energies and speaking to that person or jumping to that spot. So after Luffy senses the presence, he then connects his mind rope to that person, which allows him to then communicate, which could simply be an extension of observation Haki, or in his case, allowable through Conqueror's Haki. We have yet to see two-way telepathic communication, where two humans are able to converse through direct mental connection, but it might be something we eventually see with two high-tier observation Haki users who are also conquerors. I think the recent chapter also kind of indicates the necessity for this. It makes sense if we eventually see Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji being able to communicate to each other in this way. In 1031, we see how this would have been useful as Sanji needed to communicate to Zoro, and instead gave him a transponder snail. We also see how important communication is in the battle during the war at Onigashima, with both sides having a battle of information through Bao Huang's announcements and Momonosuke relaying information through Luffy's Voice of All Things / telepathy. Here, it kind of shows how Bao Huang's clairvoyance telepathy is being countered by a natural form of telepathic communication. On top of this, we may see that Luffy is able to connect to any Straw Hat at any time because of their close relationship. Luffy would be able to easily connect his mind rope to any of them, I think. Since we are on the topic of Voice of All Things, there's actually one more component unrelated to everything else that we have very limited information about. That is the Three-Eyed Tribe. They're rumored to automatically gain the Voice of All Things when they awaken their third eye. This third eye concept is very interesting in the context of observation Haki. In Buddhism, the third eye symbolizes pretty much all of the concepts that we have connected to observation Haki: clairvoyance, precognition, and in Taoism, it relates to memories. This connection makes it feel like the mysterious Three-Eyed Tribe might be natural masters of observation Haki in all aspects. Also, another name for the third eye is the mind's eye. So maybe this awakened ability allows you to see the mind rope that's created spiritually. It's a little confusing of when and where they would show up in the story, but it definitely feels like we'd learn about observation Haki and history when we finally meet that tribe. So now we've talked a decent amount of various ways observation Haki has been shown to us and various extrapolations we can make based off of just this power. I want to reel it back into the core concept of observation Haki before talking about the connection of devil fruits and what may be possible of observation Haki through understanding which devil fruits may be connected to the core concept of observation Haki. It seems like observation Haki at the mastery level would be the ability to see through anybody and completely understand and know them. Like if you had observation Haki and were a master at it, it'd be like if you met someone for the first time and already knew if they had good intentions, what their next actions were, how they were feeling, and what they've been through. Kind of like Sherlock Holmes, except more instinctual based. You'd be able to attach your mental rope to their spirit and gain all the information you'd want. We've been seeing this more and more in One Piece as new complex characters appear, and though they are new to the Straw Hats, the various Straw Hats are able to size them up and discern if they are enemies or allies. Luffy's interaction with Yamato is a good example of this. Seeing her power, knowing she is Kaido's daughter, and in the middle of a battlefield, yet he still knew that she holds no hostility towards him. Luffy only really fought back because he thought he was wasting time, but was willing to give Yamato time to explain herself more. And if you keep listening, you might see why eventually Luffy may not even need people to explain their past, because he will be able to know through his observation Haki. But so let's keep that part in the back of our heads as we discuss the devil fruit connection about what components would allow you to connect to somebody, know them, and even predict their future. So when we are talking about devil fruits, it makes sense to start with the fruit that gave us our first concrete look at observation Haki, the lightning fruit held by Enel. If you watch my elemental Haki video, you'd hear the background theory of how this fruit innately relates to observation Haki. The underlying hint that observation Haki was related to the element lightning, and that spirit energy can easily be converted into electricity. For Enel, the way it worked was that the lightning fruit was able to empower Enel's pre-existing observation Haki, amplifying his ability to be pseudo-future sight and pseudo-emotional sense. So when we are talking about observation Haki in the context of mind rope, it seems that having control of lightning allows you to strengthen the connection of that mind rope. Even more so than that, Enel specifically said that because of his ability to tap into electromagnetism, it allowed him to be able to read thoughts to a certain extent, which is kind of a biological connection, which I go into a little bit more detail in the elemental Haki videos. But briefly, everything in your body is based on electrical signaling. Your memories are pre-connected neurons firing electrical signals, and your bodily movements are relayed by electrical signals through your nervous system. And to add, your reactionary movements are automatic and bypass your own brain, but based on electrical signals, it can be tracked. I think this connection is mainly in place for one of the many ways that I think Vegapunk will be relevant. In this case, for recreating observation Haki through technological means. I also feel like this might be low-key foreshadowed when we were introduced to Dragon 13 on Punk Hazard, and we were initially made to believe that the dragon had telepathy of some sort, but it was just Kinemon's butt cheeks. I'll talk more about that in a different video though. That lightning devil fruit is pretty clear cut in its connection to observation Haki, but let me list off some of the devil fruits I think display branches of powers related to observation Haki, stemming off of my Haki devil fruit connection video where peak observation Haki can probably mimic devil fruits, and in another way, a peak observation Haki user might be the actual source for the powers found in some of the devil fruits. But okay, I want to clarify, I think there are other devil fruits that display observation Haki like powers, but I think some of them are more complex, and I'll get to them in another video. So these core observation Haki like devil fruits are the clone fruit, the mark fruit, clear fruit, com fruit, the memo fruit, obviously the glare fruit, and there's one more creation that I want to mention in relation to observation Haki and devil fruits, but I'll bring it up later, but including it in this list because I think there is a connection. So I think we can actually pair some of these fruits together and talk about how they relate to observation Haki. So the first theme of sensing and understanding a presence, both the clone fruit and mark fruit have a very interesting mechanic with touching someone and then memorizing their spiritual presence. In the clone fruit, one touch and someone is able to fully copy a person's flexibility, strength, and abilities aside from a devil fruit. It's kind of like a hack in being able to perfectly copy someone's current spiritual presence. The physical touch in both fruits seems to allow for an automatic mind rope to be created between the two people. In the mark fruit's case, a single touch allows the user to then be able to automatically locate the person they last touched. These two abilities are literally the presence and location portions of observation Haki. Though each fruit has an extension of their ability that is beyond what we've currently seen, the premise of them both are things that are achievable through observation Haki. And I say it's beyond what we've currently seen, but if you watched all of my videos, both powers are already kind of explained through other means. Semi-kick on allowing for the clone fruit, and the mark fruit was lightly discussed in the Usopp video. So now moving on to the next pair of fruits that relate to environmental factors. I think the naming of the fruits are interesting too, the clear fruit and the com fruit. I think both fruits are kind of synonymous or synergistic at least. It makes me think of being clear of mind and calm, which we know how important this is as a foundation for advanced observational Haki use, as Katakuri taught us in the fight against Luffy. Both of these fruits makes it harder to sense presence, so in a way they work off the presence part of observation Haki. I'd like to see how top tier observational Haki users interact with these fruits, but I'd imagine the powers of these fruits are able to fool many even top tier observational Haki users. If we classify both of these fruits to be stealth fruits that ultimately erase presence, which presence erasure was a concept I talked about throughout the Usopp video and the bonus Lafitte part, then we know that the elements of these fruits may be possible naturally already. But there is one pivotal scene, arguably one of the most mysterious scenes to date, which is Shanks showing up at Marineford. I mean, there could be a lot of explanations for this scene based on missing information, but I think we can all agree that Shanks and his entire crew showing up at Marineford the way they did, unnoticed by literally everyone, is not a normal situation. Like the other iconic scene that we've seen of Shanks is him having such overwhelming presence that people literally could not ignore him walking on Whitebeard's ship. He seemed to do that intentionally to assert himself and prove himself to his old captain's rival, but if he had such profound control of his Haki, it wouldn't be surprising if he could erase his presence too. It wasn't just Shanks either, his whole crew was a surprise. And on top of that, their entire boat showed up at Marineford despite being a whole sea away. It could be a single person on their crew has an ability that makes all of this possible, or maybe having several peak Haki users allows them to imitate devil fruit powers. Like, remember that point of how I said observation Haki and the way Luffy was using it at Wano kind of resembled how Goku or King Kai used instant teleportation or ki sense? Honestly, if instant teleportation were possible in One Piece, it might work more similarly to the mark fruit, where Shanks might have remembered the presence of someone or something and use it on his ship to travel to Marineford. I have an idea of what he might have marked. It could be Buggy or the straw hat. The straw hat idea is part of this tinfoil hat theory I have, so I'll get into that in a later video. So moving on to the next pair of fruits, we have the memo or memory fruit and the glare fruit. The glare fruit is kind of obvious, as I mentioned in my previous video, as to how it relates to observation Haki. The glare fruit is probably the most potent observational Haki devil fruit to exist. It literally turns the user into an insight human. In other words, a human who can see through everything, which is what we established as the core of observation Haki, the ability to see everything about a person. In fact, the introduction to Viola, the glare fruit user, and insight human says everyone might as well be naked before me. From the instant I saw you, I knew everything about you. This is literally the embodiment of basic observation haki. She goes on to proclaim knowing Sanji's weaknesses and being able to read his mind, which again sounds familiar as reading minds was indicated in both Enel and Katakuri to a certain extent. I will circle back to the scene in a second, but to further emphasize the connection of this fruit and observation haki, she also has an ability called Senrigan, or clairvoyance, which allows her to see anything within 4,000 kilometers. And as I mentioned in the Usopp video, this was placed in parallel to Usopp naturally gaining observation haki that replaced his need for her all-seeing eye. This felt really intentional to show us how similar these two abilities were. Going back to the other scene where she introduces herself to Sanji, despite claiming to be able to see through people, our proposed king of observation haki, Sanji, was able to reverse Uno card her and saw through her. I think this was another example showing how potent Sanji's emotional awareness is, since he was able to see through someone so powerful and seeing through others and put up a facade that fooled everyone around her. Both of them displayed similar powers where Sanji superseded hers to a certain extent. There's even more connections to Sanji, and I'll probably mention him 1 or 2 more times in this video, then save the rest for the full Sanji video coming soon. So we haven't mentioned the memo fruit yet in this pairing, but some of you may already see the connection I'm about to make. So tying back the concept we talked about how observation haki's true nature is to fully understand someone, then the question I have is, would you say you really know someone if all you know is someone's present state and may situationally know their future? I'd say no, because the best way to really know someone is to know their past. Historical data is the most valuable data in learning about someone's present and determining their future. So I think observation haki may eventually lead to being able to learn someone's past, which is a huge concept to all of One Piece. I have so much to say on this, and so starting with where we were, the Glare fruit gives the insight human the ability to not only look into someone's mind, but also their memories, and on top of that, also be able to share her own memories, telepathically by the way. Again, the concept of touch is here. It seems like for the Devil Fruit's hacked observational haki to work, instead of a spatial mind rope being established, touch is required to create the mind rope. You know what it kind of reminds me of? AirDrop and the older NFC technology that allows you to transfer data through touch, they both allow for the same thing to happen just through a different method. But okay, this fruit allows you to create a two-way street for telepathy. Again, what I imagine may be possible naturally since Luffy already demonstrated one-way telepathy, and the two-way telepathy might be achievable with people who share a greater empathy link or are both conquerors. But also natural memory sharing is not a new concept. We already saw this with Momonosuke and Zunisha. They shared some great empathy link, which may be something we learn about more in the future that tells us a lot about Momonosuke's future, but while they were fighting Jack, Zunisha communicated to Momonosuke. Zunisha transmitted his history to Momonosuke through a means that seemed different than the talking, since the talking was freaked him out, but it was like Momo had a replay of the past that Zunisha experienced, similar to how Sanji viewed Viola's memory. Momo was retelling it to those who could not hear, including Luffy, who could hear Zunisha, but didn't seem to be getting the memory transmission. So there's a lot to digest from this. Memory transfer is definitely possible naturally, Voice of All Things has a tight relationship to observation haki, and Momo and Zunisha have a better mind rope connection than Zunisha and Luffy, as Momo and Zunisha were able to establish a two-way telepathy link. Also quickly adding that Zunisha was able to share his eyesight with Momo. Which is interesting since even Viola could not do this for Usopp, or maybe she'll eventually find out that she can do this? And before I actually finally jump to the memory fruit, I want to note that somehow being the insight human, Viola displays this really weird power called Hot Iron Tear Eye Whale. I want to put an asterisk on this power and I'll come back to it in Sanji's video, discussing the relationship to insight and tears and emotions and Haki in One Piece. Okay, so the memory fruit now. This one is interesting and through a roundabout way further establishes the connection that memories are an essential part of the mind rope. The memory fruit allows you to interact and alter one's memory, and on top of that allows the user to remind spirits of who they were before being turned into homies. Pudding had a special power called Memory Filament that was literally a rope that touched spirits and reminded them of their past lives. This imagery and concept kind of reminded me of how we were introduced to poneglyphs, with these strings attached to each of them. Considering the poneglyphs had voices of their own that Roger could hear, it would make sense if that was a visible image of mind rope or observation haki. And the poneglyphs are literally written memories and historical data. It wouldn't be surprising if the memo fruit had an interesting interaction with the poneglyphs. Pudding is already supposed to be a pivotal character as the only known person from the Three-Eyed Tribe who can apparently naturally awaken Voice of All Things. It may also be that since she has the memory fruit and is a Three-Eyed Tribe descendant, she may be able to access extremely high levels of her fruit later on in the series. The other connection, though minor and more derivative, was Sugar's hobby fruit. The connection where the people turned into toys and were immediately forgotten by everyone who knew them was a really interesting addition to the power that heavily ties to the memory abilities. What if this concept was explained by the idea that anyone who had a memory of you created a mind rope to you, and the hobby fruit literally cut all the mind ropes when activated? This is just an idea that shows another manifestation of this concept displayed in the devil fruit power. Also, I'll bring up something else interesting about ropes in One Piece at the end of the video. But going back to the memory fruit and glare fruit, I think it's really important to note that both Viola and Sugar were paralleled with Sanji in interacting with memories and deceit, how both characters interacted with their insight to overcome their traumas and also abuse Sanji with it. But Sanji ultimately overcame both simply through his emotional awareness. I'm highlighting this as a major concept in my future Sanji video. Since we are talking about memories though, I do want to bring this detail to light to even further Sanji's connection to these powers, these ladies, and hint at the nature of his true power. In chapter 869, Perospero referred to the raid suits worn by the Vinsmokes as memory armor. That's a very interesting detail. I think that tells us a lot about what we're seeing in Wano, about Sanji's power and the current state of the raid suit in chapter 1031. But I'll get more into this in my Vinsmoke video, which I'll put out before the Sanji video to provide more background before getting into the full power-up video. Sorry for teasing you guys so hard, but if I just blasted it out, it'd be an hour video and cause information overload, which may be something we see in One Piece, information overload, similar to Gojo's domain expansion in Jujutsu Kaisen, which ties back to One Piece because of the concept of God and knowledge. So backing up to the observation Haki topic, just as an example of a more complex fruit that we have seen very briefly, but is probably related to observation Haki and probably mixed with Conqueror's Haki, is the Pump Pump fruit, which is essentially a power based on encouragement and inspiration. We have seen this naturally present in Luffy, especially in Marineford, where even Mihawk said he was able to inspire people to act. Luffy was able to even get Whitebeard to support him. And I talk about Usopp in relation to this concept in the power-up video. It seems like the Devil Fruit power's nature is to auto-sense presences and establish the mind rope to the people in range of the user's voice and then affect their spirits to be empowered, which derives from a Conqueror's ability to affect someone's spirit. It almost seems like this power supplies everyone connected with an imitation of Conqueror's Haki in that they become overwhelmingly powerful. In summary, I think the connection between observation Haki and Devil Fruit powers is pretty strong. If you haven't watched my previous videos yet, I would definitely recommend them because I think the logic line further supports the logic used there. I think there are still some interesting details that I haven't mentioned yet. I'll mention some at the end. I usually end my videos with some interesting details on the theory after saying a few announcements of other videos and just some other topics. I am blown away by the incredible support I've gotten. It took me about 1 month to hit 1,000 subscribers, and before I could even put out my celebration video, you guys got me to over 2,000 subscribers within a single weekend. So that being said, I will have a celebratory announcement video where I'll share a little bit about myself. I had shared a little bit of who I am already in my 1,000 TikTok follower video on my TikTok channel. Make sure you guys follow there. I do sometimes have exclusive posts there. Also, I shared a little bit more about myself in my Roger Haki video, which is probably one of the most personally important videos I have right now. Also, I haven't been promoting my Patreon mostly because of my shyness, but a few people have found my Patreon and are supporting me there, which I was surprised by, but they also very strong-handedly told me to believe in myself more. So if you guys want to support me through Patreon, I will definitely be using that soon to give and get exclusive information. Just a spoiler to something I am announcing in my celebration video, I do have some dope merch drops, and I guess this would be more of a teaser, but yeah, look out for that. And for sure, I'm going to try and crank up my video output very soon. Before getting back to pure observation Haki, I want to talk about the importance of the past and future in One Piece. I think the information shown here furthers my belief that Vegapunk may be of the Three-Eyed Tribe, or at the minimum has connections to them. If the Three-Eyed Tribe are observation Haki masters, it may be that Vegapunk mastered the present sense, which allows him to interact with energy and devil fruits in a revolutionary way, but also maybe future sense, which might be different than the traditional powers of the Three-Eyed Tribe. The way the knowledge of the past and future are symbolized in One Piece, where the government fully accepts the future knowledge of Vegapunk but condemns the past knowledge of Ohara, is really interesting. It makes you think maybe the Three-Eyed Tribe are either protected or eradicated. But even more interesting as a detail, apparently the Three-Eyed Tribe was omitted off of the slave-traded races in Sabaody auction. Since celestial dragons are the biggest contributor to the slave trade, it's interesting that they omit such an important race. But even more than that, I think another detail I mentioned at the end of my Vegapunk video about how Big Mom actually acquired such a diverse set of children, because it makes you wonder how Big Mom was able to attain the Three-Eyed Tribe DNA to create pudding. If they were so elusive and she had a full Third-Eyed Tribe husband, why would she not imprison or keep that person, and then rely on Pudding's potential awakening? What I said at the end of the Vegapunk video was that maybe Vegapunk helped Big Mom acquire some of the DNAs through something like in vitro fertilization with DNA that Vegapunk acquired, or it's his DNA, which would be a little bit weird, but looking at young Lil Mama here, I wouldn't blame him, to be honest. The concept of history in One Piece is so important. I think an overall moral displayed in practically every arc is that you can't understand the world or change the future without knowing the past that took place, which is incredibly inhibiting on the macro scale in One Piece, as the Void Century is the literal thing that, though forgotten, has shaped the world into the modern One Piece verse. The value of history is so important, it might even be the greatest treasure, which, as Rayleigh noted after conversing with the voice of all things, they learn the history of everything, but they don't know the future nor want to take direct part in reshaping it. All of this is definitely a vital aspect to the origin theory and understanding the nature of Laugh Tale. So going back to Observation Haki real quick before I go, you may have noticed I strategically omitted some details of Observation Haki here, but it's mainly because I will talk about them in another video. The one thing I did want to bring up was how Observation Haki has further proven that spiritual energy is present in objects. There were two specific instances where this was shown, so I'll talk about the anime only scene first. In Wano, when Luffy first found the Nidai Kitetsu, they showed him finding it with his Observation Haki, and as we established before, Observation Haki is to sense presence, so that means the sword had an alive presence strong enough to trigger Luffy's Observation Haki. So this was an anime only scene, but by now you guys already know my stance on how some anime only scenes actually have meaning to it. But for the ones who don't see these select scenes as light foreshadowing, there was a manga scene very similar to this. Before we even knew about Haki in Water 7, Zoro, who was blinded because he was headfirst into a chimney, somehow sensed the Sandai Kitetsu, noting the specific spooky aura it has, which was originally what led Zoro to the sword in Logtown. He was able to sense it, and probably due to Zoro's innate affinity for observational Haki, he probably leaked it to sense his sword. This being said, in this video, I talked about another non-sword object that might have a presence. In a future video, I will be talking about the swords and how they might relate to devil fruits, and the double-layered eye theory, so stay tuned for that. It's probably coming out after the Sanji video, along with another Zoro video that is really interesting. I want to start connecting One Piece to some really cool real-life places or moments in history. I've come across so many things, and bottling it up is so hard. Anyways, thank you guys for connecting with me. Looking forward to sharing more on the next Parvision. Wait, hold up, don't go just yet. I forgot one more thing related to all of this. I think most people probably haven't even noticed this detail, but I will make a quick full video about it soon. So going back to the memory string that Pudding showed, the strings were able to transmit memory through them, and that concept of string and communication and then tying it to the mind rope function of Observation Haki is really interesting because there is the string fruit that Doflamingo has. He definitely had some versatile uses for the string fruit, but the one ability that was really absurd to me was the bird cage. I have so many things to say about this ability that I'll talk about later, but did anyone realize that the bird cage somehow also prevented the telepathic communication of transponder snails? That's a really weird thing to happen from just string, and coupled with everything else about that ability makes me think that there is more about string and rope in One Piece. Okay, now I think I'm done. If you stayed here until the end, you're a real one, and let me know in the comments if you made it all the way here.